For historical context and more information, see the description below.
During the greater part of this century, we have been living in the midst of war or the rumor of war. So great has been the tragedy of it that millions of lives have been sacrificed. It continues to take its toll, not only in a continuing war, but in the thousands of people still dying because of wounds and ailments brought on by the conflicts. What is more, we're constantly living in fear of what may happen if man should use the weapons of destruction that he has at hand. Is it any wonder that international disputes are such front-page news? Any one of them has the potential of an extreme disaster. But it's not the only threat to civilization by any means. We need to keep reminding ourselves of that, particularly in a time when military weapons, when all forms of military threats keep pushing other things into the inner pages of our newspapers. There are additional threats to our survival. They may not be quite as spectacular, but in the next 50 years, they may do a great deal more damage than the wars we're fighting or that we may fight, or the wars we fought. Look, for instance, for a moment at that 18th chapter of 2 Samuel. Absalom had been rebelling against his father, and for a time it looked as though the younger man was going to ascend to the throne. But David still had a large number of followers, and he prepared to do battle with the forces of his son. How he loved the boy. Just before the battle, he told the commanders to deal gently with him. That battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. And the men of David were victorious, and the slaughter was a great one, some 20,000 men that day. Then comes the 8th verse in a very significant statement. It tells us that the wood devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. It was not an instrument of war that was manufactured by man that defeated Absalom. It was the forest, the pitfalls in a rocky terrain. It was the undergrowth that took the heaviest toll. Apparently, the soldiers of Absalom got all tangled up in it. Absalom was doing battle with his father, but it seems that he spent so much of his effort in preparation for purely military things that he forgot about the dangers of the forest. Men killed one another by the thousands that day, but a commonplace thing like the woods was responsible for more deaths than the sword. Now there are those listening, for instance, who are feeling very much the tensions of living in these days, and they're victims of just this kind of thing. Not the spectacular destruction of our time, but this thing that meets us just day after day. The forest, if you will. They live hour after hour and day after day with a daily routine constantly wishing that they had time for this and they had time for that. They don't seem to be able to break the daily routine of life. And as Samuel Butler once said, life for them is one long process of getting tired. What a percentage of people that clergymen visit in the hospital these days who are the victims just of the pace and the tension of these days. Dr. Peel has pointed out that two very interesting things happened in New York a couple of years ago. The first was a power blackout, and the second was a subway and a bus strike. And one would have thought that the result would be complete chaos, but it wasn't. There was good humor. There was enthusiasm everywhere. They saw young people organizing flashlight brigades and having great fun doing it. They saw executives of big companies thumbing rides. And there was fun and there was excitement throughout the whole city. Now, surely no one would be foolish enough to recommend that we have a power strike or a power failure in order to get that kind of excitement, but that's not the lesson that was being taught. The lesson was that it's a great thing now and then to break the routine of life. The routine with all of its tensions, if we do not, may very well break us. We get on such a treadmill, you see, as someone has pointed out. Our grandfathers would wait for days for another coach to come along after they had missed the one that they had intended to take. Well, our day is completely upset if we miss one section of a revolving door. We need the routine broken into. We need to come to that place where our souls are going to catch up with our bodies. Because this seems to be the great tragedy of it all. It is not only a threat to our physical beings, but it's a threat to our spiritual beings. Our souls are suffering. It was Dr. Jung, the great psychiatrist, who said that 80% of the people who come to him with psychiatric troubles would not be there if they had a strong religious faith. Somewhere in the commonplace, somewhere in the forest of everyday activities, we've been losing it. And we've been paying a tremendous price for it. Taylor Caldwell, a few years ago, wrote the novel Never Victorious, Never Defeated. In it, a son asks his father what he would do about the spiritual lack in the world. The reply came, I would tell the men about the God that they have lost somewhere among the machines and the flying machines and the automobiles. I would tell the children every day in all the schools about God. I would have all the churches open all the time, day and night. And I would light up the crosses and the steeples against the night skies as bright as the sun. Well, there's a struggle going on for men's souls, and the victory is not going to be an easy one. Maybe Mrs. Miniver was right. You recall when The entire sky seemed to be falling in on England. Mrs. Miniver said that we're going to have to put on spiritual dungarees until the victory is won. It represents work, doesn't it? It represents really getting down to it. Spiritual dungarees until the victory is won. But there are other perils of the commonplace, other places where the forest is bringing much more damage than the sword. Look, for instance, at the areas of nervous breakdowns, of these emotionally induced ailments. People have been cracking up at a rate that promises that out of every 12 American children born each year, one will end up a serious mental case before he dies. Think of that. 1 out of every 12, according to the present rates. There is today a minimum of 7 million neurotic people so unhappy, so frustrated in their desires, that they present an intolerable burden to themselves and to society. Each year, 250,000 new patients are added to mental institutions. And about 100,000 are readmitted every year. Some 25% of the nation's labor force is said to be emotionally disturbed. One authority, on commenting on the matter, says that if every river in the nation were suddenly to flood, the damage would equal only a fraction of the amount that this disease is costing annually. Or look to the very commonplace thing like traffic accidents. During the 4 years, for instance, of the Second World War, we lost in either death or in wounds, many of the latter, of course, recovered, 1,070,000 American servicemen in combat. During the same period, 3,394,000 people were killed or injured in the traffic accidents in the United States. Think of that. And in the majority of them, alcohol was a prime cause. And we people who are supposed to be Christian are still far too lax in the demands that we're making regarding driving automobiles and drinking hard liquor. The casualties that appear today from the war are as nothing compared with the casualties on the highway. The forest devouring so much more, so many more than the sword. Or look at another area where this is true. One of the editorial writers that I enjoy most is Arthur Bryant, who writes for the Illustrated London News. pointed out in one of his articles that London was the chief target of the German Air Force during the Blitz. But what they did pales into insignificance beside the wholesale demolitions carried out since the war in pursuit of financial gain. And he says unless this process can be halted in the 1970s, the architectural and landscape heritage of 1,000 years of British life and culture will be almost totally obliterated by the end of the century. All that's being substituted for it is a dreary and an unimaginative conglomeration of concrete blocks and slabs. Sounds rather familiar, doesn't it? And after telling about the desecration of skylines for office blocks and polluting beaches for oil, refineries, and poisoning rivers for industrial production, he quotes Osbert Lancaster, who said, "The very heart of London is to be turned into an architectural shambles. And what appears to be a cross between the United States Embassy and a supermarket is to replace Richmond Terrace and New Scotland Yard." I imagine we wouldn't have too much trouble finding places in our own country where we could match a description like that. And if there are those who say that this is a mundane affair, that this has nothing to do with religion, I disagree. For it's expressing something that is disappearing from the soul. The early builders, they built not only for the centuries, but they built for the glory of God. That's why people like to go to Europe, at least partially, for their sightseeing. That's why the cathedrals are still on the tour. That's why we got Scharfe and St. Peter's and Strasbourg and St. Paul's. 2 Chronicles, the record goes on describing the expensive woods and the metals and the other materials that went into the building of Solomon's temple. And it says he garnished the house with precious stones for beauty. That wasn't just for man. They were building to the glory of God. When one looks at some of those grand old cathedrals of Europe, the very sight of them is a benediction. You see, there's a beauty of holiness, but there's also a holiness of beauty. And we're losing it in our great massive concrete blocks and slabs that we're throwing up. The forest, devouring more than the sword, taught to believe that what is big is blessed, said the poet. We build and fell and drill and strip and mine. We gorge and glut the land from east to west, not sensing that the cancer is malign. That's a Christian's responsibility too. Or let us look into another area or two. Two of the most commonplace things in the world are water and air. Nothing very spectacular about them, is there? And yet, while we're discussing such admittedly important matters as the Vietnam War and inflation and racial troubles, the pollution of the water and air are presenting a greater threat to the life of mankind than all the others put together. What a threat it is. And we take it so complacently. We are told by the experts that increased combustion of fossil fuels brought a 10% rise in atmospheric carbon dioxide during the past century, a rate which can rise to 25% before the year 2000. And with the help of, say, 100 trillion gallons of hot water per year, this carbon dioxide cover might ultimately convert the planet into a kind of giant hothouse, melting the ice caps and so on of the world and flooding all of our coastal cities. Alternatively, by filtering out the rays of the sun, the cover might turn the planet into a giant refrigerator. What's more, our waterways are increasingly polluted by industrial waste and clogged by algae that's feeding on sewage and detergents. The whole business is mighty serious. And it's not just a secular matter. One quivers, for instance, as he picks up an article that is written by Dr. Ehrlich of Stanford University, probably one of the greatest authorities in the whole field. He says this: population has been increasing faster than food supplies since 1958. The 10 to 20 million people are already starving to death each year. And the 3/4 of the world goes to bed hungry at night. That even Americans, now get this, even Americans will probably be subjected to water rationing by 1974. That's only 4 years away. And that hepatitis, epidemic dysentery rates could easily climb by 5%, rather 500% in this country in the next 4 years, on account of crowding and increasingly polluted water. What's happened? What is happening? One reads about and one feels the tensions that we referred to in the early part of this sermon. And he knows that something is very much out of line here with the kind of thing Jesus was thinking about when he said, "Peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest." What's happened? That we're not tapping that resource. For let's face it, a great many of the people who are in our hospitals with nervous tension are supposed to be Christian people. What's happened? Or we become frightened and depressed by the threats of pollution. It's all about us. And we go back and we read the first chapter of Genesis. God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering togethers of the waters called he seas. God said that it was good. And God said that everything he had made, looked upon everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. What's happened to all that? What is happening? What can we do about it? Well, in the first place, we can wake up to realize that we're fighting a foe who's fighting for keeps, and that he is of the devil. And we can wake up to the fact that lethargy is an extravagance that we just can't afford any longer. And we can realize that our carelessness can cost us our lives. Edith Lovejoy Pierce, to put it to verse, she said, I was too busy, too preoccupied to notice whether sparrows lived or died, till suddenly a thought came to the fore. I wasn't seeing sparrows anymore. God's not absent-minded about things, nor too preoccupied to gaze at wings. And since his watchfulness is over all, he notes the common sparrows when they fall and lose their chance in this polluted year. He sees them die. He sees them disappear. We can wake up to the fact that we're in danger, and we can lend our support to those movements that are trying to do something about it, and we can be willing to pay the price for past sins, and it will be expensive. It's estimated that to meet the basic pollution control needs of the United States through the next 3 years will cost $30 billion. And that's only a part of the problem. But let us remember that our gross national product in this country is approaching the $1 trillion mark. And we're putting about $30 billion into a war that's not nearly as vital to the life of our people as having air to breathe and water to drink. God has given us so much, and we've been so careless with it, haven't we? And our carelessness is threatening to devour mankind. Before God, we've a responsibility. In this our Father's world, we have a responsibility for God's people. As Christians, there should be so many problems we're tackling in the name of Him we serve. And in many of them, let us remember, it's much later than we think. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
This morning's worship service emanated from Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh. Ministers of the church are the Reverend Dr. Howard C. Scharfe, the Reverend Dr. James R. Spear, and the Reverend J. Wayne Hanratty. organist and choir director Russell G. Wickman. Today's sermon by Dr. Scharfe was titled, Perils of the Commonplace. Your comments on these services are invited. Listen next Sunday at 11 o'clock for the regular worship service from Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Amberson Avenue and Westminster Place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.